The Zambezi Delta shimmered, a vast, oppressive oven under the relentless mid-morning sun. Dr. Zola Ndlovu, a marine biologist whose expertise was as weathered and deep as the lines etched around her eyes, adjusted the brim of her sweat-stained safari hat. Her faded khaki field gear clung to her skin, slick with perspiration that seemed to evaporate the moment it formed, leaving behind a salty residue. Her patrol boat, a small, flat-bottomed vessel, was anchored in a narrow reed-choked channel, its engine silent, allowing the only sounds to be the buzz of unseen insects and the distant cry of a fish eagle. Zola's survey of the tidal estuaries had been routine, a meticulous collection of water samples and invertebrate counts, but the exhaustion of another grueling field season weighed heavily on her. Every muscle ached, every breath felt like inhaling liquid fire. Suddenly, the air itself seemed to crackle. A sound, raw and primal, tore through the humid silence, a lion's roar. But this was no territorial display, no declaration of dominance. It was a cry laced with a desperation that twisted Zola's gut, a visceral, agonizing sound of pure, unadulterated terror. Her head snapped up, her sharp, determined eyes scanning the hazy line of distant reeds. Every instinct honed by decades in the bush screamed caution, danger. Her scientific protocol dictated observation, not intervention, especially with apex predators. Yet the sheer, profound anguish in that roar pierced through her weariness, igniting something ancient and undeniable within her. Without a second thought, she pulled anchor, starting the engine with a practiced flick. Her small boat cut through the sluggish water, pushing deeper into the labyrinthine network of channels, following the fading echoes of the roar. The air grew thicker, heavier, the smell of damp earth and decay more potent as she navigated toward the source of the distress. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear mingling with a strange, urgent resolve. This was madness, she knew, a direct violation of every safety regulation, every conservation guideline she herself had helped write. But the image of that sound, of something so powerful reduced to such despair, propelled her forward. She found her in a treacherous expanse of sun-baked mudflats, where hidden pockets of quicksand lay in wait like predatory shadows. A magnificent lioness, her golden fur caked with dark, viscous mud, was chest-deep in the clinging trap, her powerful limbs uselessly churning the thick mire. Her head, heavy with exhaustion and panic, struggled to stay above the surface, amber eyes wide with a terror that mirrored Zola's own. It was Imani, a matriarch Zola had observed before, known for her formidable presence and the resilience of her pride. To see her like this, helpless, was a brutal blow to Zola's spirit. Imani, Zola whispered, the name a ragged breath. The lioness's gaze locked onto hers, an intelligent, desperate plea that transcended species, reaching directly into Zola's soul. There was no time for calculation, no room for the cold logic of scientific detachment. The quicksand was inexorably pulling Imani down. This was an agonizing choice between duty and an overwhelming surge of compassion, a primal urge to save. And in that moment, compassion won. Working with a frantic, almost reckless urgency, Zola secured her heaviest anchor rope, tying one end to the boat's stern. The other end, thick and abrasive, she slung over her shoulder. She plunged into the fringes of the mudflat, sinking ankle-deep with every step, her boots squelching, the pull of the earth unnerving. The lioness watched her, a low, guttural rumble vibrating in her chest, a mix of fear and something akin to a desperate plea for help. Zola ignored the searing sun, the biting insects, the terrifying proximity of the struggling predator. Her brow was furrowed in intense focus, her muscles screaming as she fought the suction of the mud, inching closer. Finally, within agonizing reach, she threw the rope. It landed across Imani's massive shoulders. With trembling hands, Zola maneuvered it, struggling to secure a tight grip around the lioness's chest, just behind her front legs. The lioness surprisingly didn't fight her. The sheer exhaustion, or perhaps an instinctual understanding of the desperate act, kept her still, her eyes never leaving Zola's face. The smell of wild animal blood and fear was overpowering. Zola braced herself against the boat, digging her heels into the marginally firmer ground, and pulled. Every sinew in her body strained, sweat stinging her eyes as she heaved, the rope biting into her hands. Slowly, agonizingly, Imani began to shift, the quicksand releasing its terrible grip with a sickening gurgle. It was a dance of survival, two beings, one predator and one scientist, united in a desperate, silent battle against the indifferent wilderness. As Imani's front legs finally cleared the most treacherous depths, a profound stillness settled between them. The lioness, muddy and spent, didn't bolt. Her intelligent amber eyes, now devoid of panic, held Zola's gaze. It was a look of deep, ancient gratitude, a silent acknowledgement that transcended explanation, forging an immediate, inexplicable bond that defied scientific understanding. Days bled into a week, yet the memory of the rescue remained seared into Zola Ndlovu's mind. The feel of the thick rope in her hands, the guttural gurgle of quicksand, and most profoundly, Imani's eyes, a direct, intelligent gaze that had shattered decades of scientific dogma. She'd returned to her routine water testing near the same marsh, the sweltering Zambezi heat a constant, oppressive presence, but her movements were still haunted by the unprecedented encounter. The incident had rattled her to her core, injecting an unscientific, deeply personal element into her rigorous fieldwork. Every rustle in the reeds, every distant call of a bird, sent a ripple of apprehension through her, not of fear, but of an inexplicable anticipation. She was meticulously collecting samples from a shallow inlet, the late morning sun casting long, shifting shadows, when a stillness descended upon the marsh. The usual chorus of insects quieted. Zola slowly straightened, her hand hovering over a water testing kit. She felt it before she saw it, a presence. From the dense cover of the reeds, Imani emerged. But this time she wasn't alone. The magnificent lioness strode purposefully onto the muddy bank, her powerful gait radiating quiet authority. Behind her, in a tableau that stole Zola's breath, followed her entire pride. Three sleek, younger lionesses, their muscles rippling under their golden coats, and two gangly adolescent males, their manes just beginning to thicken. They moved with a silent, synchronized grace, stopping a respectful distance from their matriarch, their body language conveying an intense, almost human curiosity. Zola stood transfixed, a mixture of awe and profound apprehension locking her in place. Every fiber of her being screamed to retreat, to remember the immutable rules of the wild. Yet Imani approached, her amber eyes fixed on Zola with that same unnerving intelligence, devoid of aggression. The lioness lowered her massive head, slowly, deliberately. Zola, against all reason, against all ingrained fear, extended a trembling hand. And in a gesture that defied every textbook on predator behavior, Imani gently pressed her massive forehead against Zola's palm. The rough warmth of her fur, the faint scent of wild earth and predator, was overwhelming. It was a silent, powerful acknowledgement, an introduction, a reaffirmation of the bond forged in desperation. The pride watched, silent and unmoving, their gazes intense as if understanding the sacred intimacy of the moment. Zola felt a lump form in her throat, her scientific objectivity crumbling under the weight of this impossible, beautiful interaction. Amidst this marvel, as the pride eventually melted back into the reeds, leaving Zola shaken and profoundly changed, her scientific training began to reassert itself. She tried to dismiss the encounter as an anomaly, an extraordinary circumstance. Yet the feeling of Imani's head against her hand lingered. Returning to her water samples, Zola found her focus sharper, her senses more attuned. It was then, as she processed her collected data, that subtle, unsettling anomalies began to surface. The water samples, usually clear and brimming with microscopic life, exhibited a faint, almost imperceptible metallic sheen under the harsh delta light. It wasn't strong enough to trigger immediate alarm, easily dismissed as natural mineral runoff, perhaps from distant, eroded geological formations. But then she noticed it in the ecosystem itself. The vibrant green of some aquatic plants along the banks seemed dulled, their edges tinged with a faint, unusual discoloration, a sickly yellow that didn't quite match any known nutrient deficiency or natural stressor. She initially attributed it to localized runoff, perhaps agricultural waste from upstream settlements, a common enough problem. But the specific metallic glint in the water, combined with the inexplicable hue of the flora, stirred a nascent unease within her. It was a discordant note in the symphony of the Delta, a whisper of something unnatural that her scientific mind, despite her initial dismissiveness, couldn't entirely shake. The lioness's inexplicable gratitude, the silent approval of her pride, seemed to underscore a deeper, unspoken plea from the land itself. The impossible encounter with Imani and her pride had shattered Zola's perception of the natural world, prompting her to establish new, covert observation protocols. Her usual data collection now included long, patient hours in a camouflage blind, binoculars pressed to her eyes, silently documenting the lioness's movements. What she witnessed defied every principle of predator-prey dynamics, challenging her understanding of the wild. Imani's pride was exhibiting an unprecedented, selective mercy. Zola watched, breath held tight in her chest, as the lionesses, formidable hunters by nature, inexplicably protected vulnerable animals. One sweltering afternoon, she observed them forming a loose, watchful perimeter around a lost cheetah cub, whimpering and disoriented, ensuring no hyenas or other threats could approach. Another time, they seemed to guide an injured warthog, its leg clearly broken, towards a waterhole, ignoring its terrified squeals. But it was a late afternoon tableau, bathed in the golden hour light, that solidified Zola's astonishment into profound wonder. From her hidden vantage point, she watched Imani, her powerful frame silhouetted against the setting sun, with the rest of her pride. They weren't hunting. Instead, they formed a watchful, protective circle around a frightened, lost elephant calf, no taller than Zola's waist. The calf, separated from its herd, trumpeted nervously, but the lionesses kept a respectful distance, their gazes scanning the horizon, warding off unseen scavengers. Zola felt a lump in her throat, tears stinging her eyes. This wasn't instinct. It was something else, something she couldn't categorize, something deeply poignant and intelligent. Her colleague, Dr. Alistair Finch, a seasoned conservationist known for his sharp intellect and even sharper skepticism, arrived at the camp a few days later, ostensibly for a collaborative assessment. Zola, knowing how outlandish her claims would sound, hesitated to share her observations. But Alistair, too, was a scientist, driven by data. When she showed him the time-stamped drone footage and the detailed field notes of the pride's aberrant behavior, his initial dismissiveness morphed into an uncomfortable curiosity, then outright astonishment. He witnessed firsthand Imani guiding a bewildered herd of impala away from a hidden quicksand trap, her powerful roar acting as a warning, not a threat. This is impossible, Zola, he murmured, his voice hushed, his skepticism finally breaking under the weight of undeniable evidence. They're acting like guardians. Simultaneously, amidst the marvel of Imani's changed behavior, Zola's routine environmental tests continued to yield increasingly alarming results. The faint metallic sheen she had dismissed earlier was now more pronounced, consistent, appearing in samples collected from various points across the delta. Her advanced portable spectrometry unit detected recurring biomarkers, unusual protein structures that shouldn't exist in such quantities within the natural ecosystem. More concerning were the traces of microplastics. While microplastics were ubiquitous, these samples contained a specific composition, a complex blend of polymers, and at concentrations far higher than anything Zola had ever encountered in a seemingly pristine wilderness. Her initial assumptions of natural runoff or simple agricultural pollution evaporated. This wasn't accidental. The precision of the biomarkers, the unusual chemical signature of the microplastics, pointed to something far more sinister. It wasn't the haphazard waste of a nearby village or the slow erosion of a distant mine. This was specific, targeted, and deliberate. A chilling thought began to take root in Zola's mind. Something more insidious than simple poaching or natural environmental degradation was at play. This wasn't just pollution. It was a carefully engineered disruption, a shadow spreading over the sanctuary she had dedicated her life to protecting. And Imani, with her inexplicable mercy, seemed to be fighting against it, a silent sentinel in a world under siege. The dry season clamped down on the Zambezi Delta like a vice, baking the earth to a dusty, cracked canvas. Watering holes, once plentiful, dwindled to muddy puddles, the air thick with the desperation of thirst. It was during this brutal period that Zola Ndlovu and Alistair Finch witnessed something that not only defied biological understanding, but seemed to mock the very concept of the food chain. From a hidden vantage point perched atop a sun-baked kopje, Zola and Alistair watched, binoculars lowered, their faces etched with a profound blend of disbelief and astonishment. Below them, at a large, shrinking watering hole, a scene unfolded that shattered every tenet of wildlife biology. Imani's pride, calm and non-aggressive, lay scattered around the muddy perimeter, their bodies radiating a relaxed, almost serene presence. And at the water's edge, drinking cautiously but unmolested, was a massive Cape buffalo herd. Buffalo, the notorious antagonists of lions, their horns lethal, their stampedes devastating. Yet here they were, sharing the most critical resource in the harshest season, their usual defensive posture softened by an unspoken truce. Alistair, distinguished and usually unflappable, stammered, This is utterly unprecedented. Lions and buffalo, sharing, in a drought, it's impossible. Zola could only nod, her own mind grappling with the reality before her eyes. The sheer audacity of the scene, the defiance of millennia of predatory instinct, was almost too much to comprehend. This was not a fluke. This was a deliberate, observed act of cooperation. Over the next few weeks, the phenomenon escalated. The selective mercy Zola had observed earlier now manifested as a full-blown, pervasive shift. This learned behavior, starting with Imani's pride, began to spread like a behavioral virus to other predator groups in the region. Other lion prides, even leopard and wild dog packs, were observed displaying similar, non-aggressive cohabitation around dwindling water sources, or even showing protection towards vulnerable prey. It was an accelerated cognitive leap, a rapid evolution of behavior that simply shouldn't be possible in such a short time frame. The implications extended far beyond simple animal behavior. It suggested complex reasoning, an ability to assess and adapt that hinted at something more profound than instinct alone. They're not just reacting, Alistair mused, his voice hushed with awe. They're deciding, as if they understand something we don't. Simultaneously, Zola was racing against time in her makeshift lab, cross-referencing her strange environmental readings with decades of historical data from the Zambezi Delta. The findings were chilling. The new pollutants and biomarkers she'd identified were indeed localized, concentrated specifically around the areas where these anomalous animal behaviors were most prevalent. And they weren't random. Her historical data showed a distinct, steady increase in their presence over the past year, directly correlating with the rapid, unprecedented behavioral shifts in the apex predators. The metallic sheen in the water was from an unusual heavy metal compound, never before detected in the region. The microplastics weren't just common industrial waste. They contained a unique polymer blend, and even more unsettling, microscopic traces of bioluminescent nanoparticles. The recurring biomarkers, initially unidentifiable protein structures, now with more advanced analysis, suggested a synthetic biological agent designed to interact with neurological pathways. This isn't pollution, Alistair, Zola stated, her voice tight with a dawning horror, pushing a stack of graphs and data printouts across the table. This is engineered. These chemicals, these biomarkers, they're precise, and they're increasing at the same rate as the animal's behavior is changing. But the correlation was too stark, too precise to be coincidence. The Delta wasn't just sick, it was being tampered with. And the incredible, impossible empathy of Imani and her pride, the unnatural alliance blossoming in the face of environmental collapse, was perhaps a desperate, emergent response to a threat neither Zola nor Alistair could yet fully comprehend. You won't believe what happens next, the depths of this conspiracy, the shocking truth about what's really happening in the Zambezi Delta. It's enough to make you question everything. If you're as gripped by this unfolding mystery as I am, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single crucial detail of this life-threatening discovery. The sun beat down on the Zambezi, but Zola barely felt its heat. Her focus was absolute, binoculars locked on the scene unfolding some 50 yards away. Imani, the magnificent lioness, was demonstrating a breathtaking leap in intelligence, A gazelle, its leg caught in a cruel wire snare set by poachers, thrashed desperately, its cries piercing the air. Any other lion would have seen an easy meal, but not Imani. With a precision that sent shivers down Zola's spine, Imani nudged the terrified animal, then systematically began to dismantle the snare. She used her teeth and powerful paws, not to tear at the gazelle, but to unpick the crude metal wires, to loosen the knot. It was a complex series of actions requiring foresight, understanding of cause and effect, and an astonishing level of restraint. When the gazelle finally bolted, limping but free, Imani watched it go, then turned, her amber eyes briefly meeting Zola's from across the savannah. This act unequivocally confirmed Zola's deepening suspicions about the pride's heightened cognitive abilities. It wasn't just instinct, it was problem-solving, his empathy, and a level of planning unprecedented in wild predators. Alistair, equally stunned, had immediately called in reinforcements. Within days, the temporary field camp transformed with the arrival of Dr. Anya Sharma, a brilliant neuroscientist specializing in animal cognition, and Dr. Ricardo Chavez, a seasoned veterinary surgeon. Their mission, to conduct neurological studies on sedated lions from Imani's pride. Under the harsh, stark, artificial lights of a rugged field laboratory tent, Zola, her face etched with exhaustion and determination, knelt beside a makeshift examination table. A massive lion, its powerful form momentarily still under sedation, lay before them. Ricardo, focused and intense in sterile gloves, meticulously positioned the advanced brain scanning equipment. Anya, analytical and precise, monitored the readouts, her brow furrowed in concentration. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of scientific rigor and an almost eerie sense of profound discovery. The initial scans confirmed their wildest theories. The lions, particularly Imani, exhibited structural brain changes, not just activity, but actual alterations in brain architecture. There was increased connectivity in regions associated with empathy, social cognition, and long-term planning. The prefrontal cortex, often linked to executive functions in humans, showed an unprecedented level of development for a wild predator. These were changes that, in any other context, would be considered a rapid evolutionary leap, a monumental shift in cognitive capacity that simply shouldn't occur in a single generation. As Anya scrolled through the intricate neural maps, Zola felt a sudden, profound epiphany. It wasn't just gratitude or some mysterious spiritual awakening. The animal's accelerated intelligence wasn't a gift, it was a defense mechanism. She looked at the glowing readouts, the complex web of enhanced neural pathways, and then back at her own environmental data. The insidious neurotoxin, the specific biomarkers, the metallic trace elements, the peculiar microplastics. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The pollutants, the synthetic biological agents, they weren't just harming the ecosystem. They were subtly, insidiously altering the very neurology of the animals. This wasn't natural pollution, it was a targeted, human-induced environmental agent. The rapid cognitive enhancement, the emergent empathy, the unprecedented cooperation among predators was a desperate, adaptive evolutionary response. The animals were unknowingly being pushed towards survival by enhanced cognition, their brains rewiring themselves to cope with an invisible, devastating threat. The lionesses, the elephants, the entire delta were mutating, forced into an unnatural intelligence as a last-ditch effort to survive a poison that was both killing and changing them. It was a terrifying, brilliant, and utterly monstrous side effect of whatever was being unleashed upon the Zambezi, an accidental creation of super-intelligent, yet deeply threatened beings. The conspiracy was far more intricate and far more terrifying than Zola could have ever imagined. The hum of the laptop was the only sound in Zola's dimly lit tent, a stark contrast to the buzzing night outside. Her face, etched with exhaustion in a new chilling resolve, was illuminated by the screen's glow. On it, complex graphs of neurological changes intertwined with environmental contamination data. And then, the devastating truth: incriminating corporate documents. For weeks, Zola, Alistair, Anya, and Ricardo had worked tirelessly, cross-referencing, analyzing, and deciphering. As Zola prepared her groundbreaking findings for publication, pushing past the scientific community's inevitable disbelief, the pieces of the puzzle aligned into a horrifying picture. The specific neurotoxin, the peculiar microplastics, the unique biomarkers, they weren't random. They originated from the operations of Eco-Frontier Solutions, a powerful, secretive corporation involved in resource extraction hundreds of kilometers upstream. Their public facade was green energy and sustainable development, but their internal documents, painstakingly leaked to Zola by an anonymous source, revealed a different story. They were experimenting with a proprietary extraction process, using advanced synthetic compounds to maximize yield. The environmental degradation wasn't a regrettable accident, it was a deliberate cover-up of their highly unethical and polluting operations. They had been secretly dumping their toxic byproducts, containing the neuroactive agents, into the Zambezi, assuming the vastness of the delta would dilute and disperse any evidence. But instead, it had inadvertently caused the accelerated evolution of the delta's wildlife. The animals weren't just dying, they were changing, their brains rewiring to cope with the very poison that threatened their existence. Zola stared at a printed copy of the scientific paper, her hand trembling slightly as she held it. The implications of her discovery were immense, a global paradigm shift in understanding human impact and animal adaptation. This wasn't merely a conservation crisis, it was a revelation that would rewrite biology textbooks and expose a corporate behemoth. But with such a revelation came a terrifying choice. Exposing the truth would mean risking everything: her career, her reputation, and undoubtedly her life against an enemy whose influence stretched into the highest echelons of power. Remaining silent, however, would mean becoming complicit, letting the silent devastation of the Delta and its miraculously evolving inhabitants continue unchecked. The weight of that decision pressed down on her, suffocating. As the pre-dawn light began to faintly tinge the horizon, a shadow fell across the tent flap. Zola looked up, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing silently at the edge of the camp, her powerful form silhouetted against the nascent light, was Imani. The lioness watched Zola intently, her amber eyes burning with an almost human understanding. She was more than just a magnificent predator. She was a symbol of the profound transformation, a living testament to the terrible cost of human ambition, and a silent demand for justice. The connection Zola had forged with Imani, born of desperation and gratitude, now transcended species, becoming a shared burden of survival. In that profound, silent exchange, Zola's resolve solidified. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective determination. The ultimate confrontation, she realized, was not with the unpredictable wild, but with the insidious, far more dangerous corruption of human power and greed. She couldn't abandon Imani or the future of the Delta to this silent, engineered devastation. Her work, her life, had led her to this moment. She had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Dr. Zola Ndlovu, a seasoned marine biologist, embarked on what promised to be another routine wildlife survey in the sweltering heat of the Zambezi Delta. But the familiar rhythm of her research was shattered by a desperate, distressed roar echoing through the marshland. A lion in serious trouble. That moment, finding a magnificent lioness, Imani, trapped chest-deep in treacherous quicksand, demanded an impossible split-second decision that defied every protocol. Her act of selfless courage forged an unprecedented connection, an extraordinary encounter that shattered all scientific understanding of apex predators. Imani's inexplicable gratitude, the selective mercy of her pride, and their unnatural alliance with prey unveiled a horrifying truth. A subtle, insidious neurotoxin was permeating the ecosystem, inadvertently pushing the Delta's wildlife towards a rapid, adaptive evolution. This wasn't merely pollution, it was a deliberate cover-up by a powerful, secretive corporation. Now, armed with irrefutable evidence, Zola faced the ultimate ethical dilemma. The silent devastation demanded action, but exposing the truth meant risking everything. As Imani's watchful presence at the edge of her camp became a symbol of profound transformation and a silent demand for justice, Zola's decision solidified. The ultimate confrontation was not with the wild, but with human corruption, a battle she was now prepared to fight, no matter the cost.